So this is the second part of graphing sine and cosine. So my next example would be y equals cosine of negative, or y equals cosine of x minus pi. Okay, and remember your transformations. This pi would be a horizontal shift pi units to the right. Okay, so I'm going to graph cosine, the regular parent function, and I'm going to shift it over to my right pi units. All right, so graphing y equals cosine of x. Yeah, of x. I'm going to skip 4 units, label that 2 pi. Halfway between 0 and 2 pi is pi. Halfway between that is pi over 2. So every unit is pi over 2 units long. So this is 3 pi over 2. Going to my negative side because I have to graph 2 periods. Negative 2 pi. Here is negative pi. Here is negative pi over 2. And here is negative 3 pi over 2. Okay. So again, I'm going to label 2 units as 1 and negative 1. So here we go. At 0, cosine value is 1. At pi over 2, it's 0. At pi, it's at negative 1. At 3 pi over 2, it's at 0. At 2 pi, it's at 1. The reason why is here, my period is always going to be 2 pi over b. My b value is 1 because we have an imaginary 1 there, right? Which we do not represent. So my period is 2 pi. My amplitude is 1, right? That's just the parent function values of my amplitude and period when it comes to cosine and sine. So at pi over 2, negative pi over 2 is the same thing as 3 pi over 2, remember. So my value of cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0. At negative pi, cosine of negative pi is the same thing as cosine of pi, which is at negative 1. Cosine of negative 3 pi over 2 is the same thing as cosine of pi over 2, which is at 0. Cosine of negative 2 pi is the same thing as cosine of 2 pi, which is at 1. Okay? And here, class, we can see that it's an even function. Remember our last lesson that we learned that an even function is symmetrical about the y-axis. So if you reflect it over the y-axis, it's the same picture. Okay, and that's the trait that we have right here. All right, so I graphed y equals cosine of x. Now I just got to move this, shift this pi units. So if I shift this whole graph pi units long, I'm just going to move it. That's pi over 2. This would be pi. Right? Pi units long is right there. So if I shifted it pi over 2 or pi units long, this guy here should be 3 pi. Because if this is 2 pi, this is, well, this is 4 pi over 2. This is 5 pi over 2. This would actually be 6 pi over 2, which is 3 pi. Okay? All right. So when you're doing this on a paper, not on my app here, you would actually have something like this. Let me move this back and show you guys. Okay. You would label the extra points in red, right? And then move this point over to pi, move this point over to there, move this point over to here. I'm just shifting every point pi units long. Okay. So it looked like this. Go from here, down, up, down. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay, how about this? I believe that this is my last one. So if the cosine, I have to graph y equals cosine of 2x minus pi minus 3. So here, what we have to first do is we have to factor out our coefficient of x, okay? So if I factor that out, it will be x minus pi over 2. Okay, the easiest, simplest way to get what this number is, or get what this number is if I factor out a 2, 2 times what equals pi? If I factor this back, if I multiply this back, so if I multiply this number back into what I have there, let's say I didn't know it was pi over 2, right? It was question mark. 2 times what number equals pi? That would actually just be pi over 2, right? So now that we've got that, it's the cosine equals y minus 3. I know that the minus 3 is going to be a vertical shift down 3 units. I know that this one here, pi over 2, is going to be a horizontal shift pi over 2 units to the, actually, you know what? Let me make this a plus. Make this a plus because we just did a minus. To the left, pi over 2 units. I know that this 2 here affects my period. So my period is going to equal 2 pi over 2 or pi units long. And my amplitude is the same because there's no number here, right? It's an imaginary or an invisible one. Okay. I'm going to show you guys a little trick. Okay. I know my period is pi. Okay. So if it's pi, then I know I'm going to skip 4 units. Okay. Go here. I'm going to label that as pi. Halfway between 0 and pi is pi over 2. Halfway between 0 and pi over 2 is pi over 4. Okay, making this a little smaller. So it's out of my way. So if 1 unit is pi over 4, this would be 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. This would be 3 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 4. And this would be 4 pi over 4, which is just pi. Okay? And then if each unit is pi over 4, this is negative pi over 4. This would be pi over, pi over 2. This would be negative 3 pi over 4. And this would be pi. Now, the reason why I did this is because I'm going to first graph y equals cosine of 2x. If I graph that, then if you know 0 starts off at 1, my next point down is 0, next point down is -1, next point is 0, next point is 1. Okay, going to do that on the negative side, 0, -1, 0, and 1. So here, I just graphed y equals 2x. Okay? And then I'm going to shift this over to the left, pi over 2, down 3. So I'll just show you guys that here, shifting this pi over 2 units. What is pi over 2 units? That represents 2 units, right? So 1, 2, and then down 3 would be 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that is the graph there. And then if I graph this original function like that. Cool. And then if I make these points, my midline actually shifted as well, right? Okay. My midline here is this line here. So my midline is y equals -3. All right. So that's how you graph sine and cosine and things you need to know. I'm going to end with just your general form of sine and cosine. All right. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.